I'm Colonel Christina Barron, 38. I earned my commission at 22 and spent the next 16 years in Air Force intelligence, coordinating missions most people will never hear about, guiding teams through chaos by voice alone. For years, I put service above everything: family, comfort, recognition. But one afternoon at my father's Memorial Day barbecue, the man I'd once looked up to told a crowd I'd wasted my life in uniform. Minutes later, his old SEAL buddy froze mid-conversation when I answered a classified call. That voice in his headset years ago, the one that guided his team out under fire, was mine. Have you ever been dismissed or humiliated by someone who should have known your worth? If you have, tell me your story in the comments. You're not alone. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're tuning in from. And if you've ever had to stand your ground after being underestimated, hit like and subscribe for more true stories about setting boundaries and reclaiming your worth. What happened next might surprise you. I grew up knowing what discipline looked like. My father, Jack Barron, had served as an Army Ranger, made it to Sergeant First Class before retiring into civilian contracting. Our home in Virginia was run with the same precision he'd learned on base: way-up times, chores assigned like duty rosters, expectations clearly defined. When I was 17, sitting at our kitchen table with ROTC brochures spread out in front of me, I thought he'd be proud. Instead, he pushed his coffee cup aside and said, "You're smart enough to do better than that." My mother, Martha, had been an Army nurse. She squeezed my shoulder and said nothing, but her eyes told me to follow my own path. I did. By 22, I was commissioned as a second lieutenant in Air Combat Command, intelligence track. The promotion to first lieutenant came naturally, then captain by 28. My focus wasn't on glory. It was on the work itself, the coordination between assets and personnel that kept people alive. My mother died when I was 31, ovarian cancer that moved faster than any of us expected. At her funeral, my father shook hands with old service buddies and accepted condolences with the stoicism I'd inherited from him. But after that, something shifted. His calls became shorter. His interest in my career faded into polite questions that never dug deeper than surface level. When I made major at 33, I called to tell him. He said, "That's nice, honey. Listen, I've got a client meeting in 10 minutes. I told myself he was grieving in his own way. By 38, I'd made lieutenant colonel and earned a call sign that meant something in certain circles: Nighthawk. It came from a mission in Syria where I'd coordinated a night extraction for a ranger unit pinned down by hostile fire. My voice, calm, precise, unwavering, had guided them through 7 miles of hostile territory without a single casualty. The call sign stuck. I became the voice that came through the static when things went wrong, the one who pieced together intelligence feeds and comm channels to turn chaos into clear directives. My job wasn't glamorous. It was headsets and monitors, heat maps glowing in darkened operations centers, and the weight of knowing that every word I spoke could mean the difference between someone going home or not. I didn't wear my uniform to family gatherings. I didn't talk about deployments or missions. Operational security was part of it, but so was the growing sense that my father wouldn't understand even if I could tell him. To him, I'd become a bureaucrat in camouflage, someone who shuffled papers while real soldiers did real work. I'd stopped trying to correct that impression. When he invited me to his Memorial Day barbecue, I almost declined. I had mission briefs to review, a deployment rotation to coordinate. But it had been 4 months since I'd seen him in person, and some part of me, maybe the part that still remembered him teaching me to tie my boots with crisp, efficient movements, wanted to try again. So I drove out to his place on a Saturday afternoon, my phone buzzing intermittently with encrypted notifications I'd deal with later. The house looked the same: neat lawn, American flag hanging beside the front door, the smell of charcoal and lighter fluid drifting from the backyard. I found him at the grill, flipping burgers with the precision of a man who'd cooked for entire platoons. His friend Cal Reeves stood nearby, beer in hand, talking about some fishing trip they were planning. Cal was retired Navy, a chief petty officer who'd served with SEAL Team 9 before his knees gave out. He was broad-shouldered, with sun-weathered skin and the kind of quiet intensity that marked certain veterans. When my father introduced us, Cal's handshake was firm, his eyes assessing. Air Force, huh? He said, not unkindly. What do you do? Intelligence operations, I said, keeping it vague. Coordination and liaison work mostly. My father laughed, not quite bitterly but close. She makes sure the right forms get to the right desks. Very important work. I smiled and took a sip of the lemonade someone had handed me. The comment wasn't new. Over the years, he developed a narrative about my career that fit his understanding of military service, combat deployments, visible medals, the kind of sacrifice that came with scars you could see. My work didn't fit that mold, so in his mind, it didn't count. Cal raised an eyebrow but said nothing. We moved through the afternoon with the rhythms of forced normalcy. Neighbors stopped by, old friends from my father's contracting days. They asked polite questions about my career, and I gave polite answers. My father held court near the grill, telling stories about job sites and close calls with OSHA inspectors, his audience laughing on cue. I stayed on the periphery, checking my phone intermittently. The notifications were routine, status updates, shift changes, nothing that required immediate action. But I kept the phone close anyway, a habit born from years of being on call. Around 1600 hours, my father gathered everyone near the patio table. He had that look on his face, the one that meant he was about to say something he thought was profound. I'd seen it at family dinners, at my college graduation, at my mother's wake. You know, he started, his voice carrying across the yard. I look at Christina here, and I think about all the choices we make in life. I felt my stomach tighten, but I kept my expression neutral. She could have done anything. Smart as a whip, full ride to college, could have been a lawyer or a doctor. Instead, she spent the last 16 years in uniform, moving from one base to another, no husband, no kids, just a career that's going to spit her out with a pension and nothing else to show for it. The neighbors shifted uncomfortably. Someone coughed. Cal's expression went carefully blank. My father smiled, like he'd just delivered wisdom instead of a gut punch. I mean, I love her, don't get me wrong. But sometimes I think she wasted her life in uniform. Could have had a real life by now. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. I didn't respond immediately. I'd learned over the years that engaging with his disappointment only made it worse. Instead, I took another sip of lemonade and felt my phone vibrate insistently against my hip. The pattern was distinct, priority channel, Joint Command Pacific. I pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and felt the world narrow. "Excuse me," I said quietly. "I need to take this." I walked toward the side yard, away from the crowd, and answered, "Baron." The voice on the other end was clipped, familiar, Colonel Marcus Lee, my commanding officer. "Nighthawk, we have a situation in the Philippine Sea. USS Michael Murphy reports mechanical failure during interdiction ops. They've got a hello down, crew of 4, currently grounded on an unsecured islet. We need coordination for extraction with available assets." I shifted into operational mode instantly, my mind cataloging resources and timelines. What's our window? 90 minutes before hostile forces potentially reach their position. We're pulling together a response package, but we need someone who can manage the comm coordination between naval assets and Air Force QRF. Understood. I need access to CommandNet and real-time ISR feed. I can be operational in 10 minutes. Negative. We need you now. Conference line is active. I'm patching you in. My voice changed without conscious thought, lower, sharper, stripped of everything except clarity and authority. This was the voice that had guided extractions through hostile fire, the voice that men trusted when everything else fell apart. Nighthawk copies all. Patching in now. Stand by. Behind me, I heard footsteps. I turned to see Cal standing a few feet away, his beer forgotten, his face frozen in an expression I couldn't immediately read. He stared at me like he'd seen something impossible. "That voice," he said slowly. "You're Nighthawk." The patio had gone quiet. I lowered the phone slightly, still connected to the command net, and met Cal's eyes. He looked like someone had just explained a magic trick he'd been trying to figure out for years. "Wait," my father said, walking over with several guests trailing behind him. "What's going on?" Cal didn't look away from me. Helmand Province, summer of 2018. Our team was pinned down in a compound, 8 clicks from extraction, surrounded on 3 sides. We had air support but no clear route out. Then this voice came through our comms, female, calm as anything, like she was narrating a documentary instead of managing a firefight. She coordinated our movement, repositioned drone coverage, called in precision strikes that walked the line so close we could feel the heat. She got all 6 of us out without a scratch. He pointed at me, his hand steady despite the shock in his eyes. That was you. Nighthawk. I'd know that voice anywhere. My father's face had drained of color. The guests stood frozen, uncertain whether to stay or leave. I kept my expression neutral, professional. This wasn't the time for vindication or explanations. There were 4 people currently sitting on an unsecured islet in the Philippine Sea who needed me focused. I need to handle this, I said quietly. It's operational. I turned back toward the house, phone pressed to my ear, and walked through the side gate. Behind me, I heard my father say something to Cal, his voice low and urgent, but I was already gone, mentally if not physically. The mission took 47 minutes. I coordinated between a Navy destroyer, 2 Marine helos out of Okinawa, and an Air Force AC-130 providing overwatch. The extraction team reached the downed crew with 12 minutes to spare before hostile forces arrived. All personnel recovered safely, 0 casualties, mechanical failure cataloged for later investigation. When I hung up, I was standing in my father's driveway, the evening light slanting across the neighborhood in shades of gold and amber. My hands were steady. My breathing was calm. I'd done this hundreds of times, stepped into chaos and turned it into order. But this time felt different. This time, someone had connected the voice to the person. I walked back to the patio. The crowd had thinned, most guests had made polite excuses and left. Only Cal and my father remained, sitting at the patio table in silence. My father looked up when I approached, his expression unreadable. Is everything okay? He asked. It is now. Cal stood, his posture respectful in a way that felt unfamiliar. How long have you been doing that? 14 years in operational roles. 237 missions coordinated. 0 losses. The numbers came automatically, clinical, and precise. Cal shook his head slowly. I looked you up once, years ago, tried to figure out who Nighthawk was. It's all classified. They wouldn't tell us anything except that he corrected himself. You saved our lives that night. We wrote commendations, tried to get you recognized. It all disappeared into the system. That's how it works, I said. The job isn't about recognition. My father hadn't moved. He sat at the table, staring at his hands, and for the first time in years, I saw something in his face I'd almost forgotten: uncertainty. Not the dismissive confidence he wore like armor, but genuine confusion about who I was and what I did. Christina, he started, then stopped. I waited. Years of operational discipline had taught me the value of silence, of letting other people fill it with their own realizations. I didn't know, he finally said. You never told me. You never asked. The words weren't cruel, just factual. He'd built a story about my life based on assumptions and disappointment, and I'd stopped trying to correct it because correction required him to listen. Cal cleared his throat. I should head out. Christina, it was an honor to meet you. Really? He shook my hand again, longer this time, then clapped my father on the shoulder and left. The silence that followed felt heavier than the conversation. My father stood, walked to the grill, and started cleaning it with mechanical precision. I recognized the gesture. It was what he did when he needed to process something too big for immediate words. How long have you been doing those kinds of missions? He asked, not looking at me. Since I made captain. The call sign came 2 years after that. And you never thought to mention it? It's classified. I couldn't give you details even if I wanted to. You could have told me it mattered. His voice was rough, edged with something I couldn't quite name. You could have told me you were doing something more than paperwork. I picked up a few empty bottles from the table, carried them to the recycling bin. Would you have believed me? Or would you have assumed I was exaggerating to make myself feel better about wasting my life? He flinched. The words landed harder than I'd intended, but I didn't take them back. They were true. I thought you were drifting, he said quietly. 16 years in, no family, no roots. Your mother and I, we built something. We had a home, a life. I look at you, and I see someone who's given everything to something that's going to replace you the second you retire. You see what you want to see, I said. You always have. He turned then, his face flushed. That's not fair. Isn't it? You decided who I was the day I commissioned. You decided my career didn't measure up to whatever standard you'd set. And when Mom died, you stopped even pretending to care. I cared. I still care. You have a strange way of showing it. The anger in my voice surprised me. I'd kept it buried for so long, wrapped in professionalism and distance, that I'd almost forgotten it was there. But standing in his backyard, watching him struggle to reconcile the daughter he'd dismissed with the officer Cal had recognized, I felt it rise like a tide. I sent you half my salary for 3 years to keep your business afloat after Mom died. Did you think that money came from paperwork? I took extra deployments, extra shifts, because you needed it and I could provide it. And you never once asked why I had it to give. His face went pale. I didn't know you didn't want to know. You wanted me to be the disappointment so you could feel justified in your own choices. You wanted me to fail so you didn't have to confront the fact that maybe, just maybe, I found meaning in something you don't understand. I picked up my keys from the patio table. My hands were shaking slightly, adrenaline from the mission and the confrontation mixing into something volatile. Christina, wait. I'm done waiting. I've been waiting for 16 years for you to see me as something other than a mistake. I'm tired of it. I walked to my car, my father calling after me, his voice carrying that note of desperation I'd never heard before. But I didn't stop. I'd spent too many years responding to his disappointment with patience and restraint, hoping that eventually he'd come around. Cal's recognition had shifted something fundamental, not because I needed external validation, but because it had forced my father to confront the gap between his assumptions and reality. I drove back to base lodging, the highway stretching out in the fading light. My phone buzzed with a message from Colonel Lee. Excellent work tonight, Nighthawk. Detailed debrief at 0800. I sent back a confirmation and set the phone aside. The adrenaline was fading now, leaving behind the familiar exhaustion of a mission completed and a confrontation I'd been avoiding for years. When I finally reached my quarters, I sat in the silence and let myself feel it, not the anger anymore, but the clarity that came after. My father's opinion didn't define my work. It never had. The men and women who came home because of my voice, the missions that succeeded because of coordination and precision, the quiet satisfaction of doing the job well, that was enough. It had always been enough. I fell asleep easily that night, more easily than I had in months, and dreamed of nothing at all. The debrief at 0800 was routine, after-action reports, coordination timelines, lessons learned for future operations. Colonel Lee commended the response time, noted the efficiency of inter-service communication, and filed the appropriate paperwork for unit recognition. By 0930, I was back at my desk, reviewing intelligence summaries for the Pacific Theater. My phone rang mid-morning. I glanced at the caller ID, my father. I let it go to voicemail. He called again 20 minutes later. Voicemail again. By the third call, I answered, more out of curiosity than obligation. What do you need? My tone was clipped, professional. There was a pause on the other end, long enough that I almost hung up. Then he said I wanted to apologize. For yesterday. For a lot of things. I didn't respond immediately. Apologies from my father were rare, usually wrapped in justifications that undermined their sincerity. Okay, I said finally. Cal called me last night. He told me more about Helmand Province. About what you did. I don't need Cal to validate my work. I know. But I needed to hear it. I needed someone to explain to me what I should have been asking you about all along. He sounded tired, older than his 62 years. I built this idea in my head about what your career was, and I never checked if it was true. That's on me. Yes, I said. It is. Another pause. I could hear him breathing, the faint sound of traffic in the background. Can we talk? In person, I mean. Not now, I know you're working. But soon. I looked at the stack of reports on my desk, the mission schedule pinned to my wall, the life I'd built that had nothing to do with his approval. I'll think about it, I said. That's all I'm asking. I hung up without saying goodbye. It wasn't cruelty, it was boundary setting, the kind I should have established years ago. For too long, I'd allowed his disappointment to shape my responses, trying to prove something that didn't need proving. That ended now. Over the following weeks, he called occasionally, short conversations, nothing heavy. He asked about my work in vague terms, respecting the boundaries of classification. He mentioned attending a veterans event, reconnecting with old Army buddies. He sent a text once that simply said, "Proud of you," which I acknowledged with a thumbs-up emoji because I didn't know what else to say. Cal reached out too, asking if I'd be willing to speak at a SEAL reunion event. "We'd like to recognize Nighthawk properly," he said. "Let people know who kept them alive." I declined politely. The work wasn't about recognition, and I had no interest in becoming a symbol or a story. But I appreciated the offer, appreciated that he understood what I did in a way my father was only beginning to grasp. My life continued with its usual rhythms, mission briefs, coordination drills, mentoring junior officers who were navigating the same intelligence track I'd walked years before. Captain Riley Moss, a pilot transitioning into operations coordination, reminded me of myself at 26, sharp, focused, hungry to prove herself. I took her under my wing, not with overt mentorship, but with the steady guidance of someone who'd walked the path. "How do you handle it?" she asked once, over coffee in the operations center break room. "Handle what?" "The weight. Knowing that if you make a mistake, people die." I considered the question. "You train until the procedures become automatic. You trust your team. And you accept that perfection isn't possible, but excellence is." She nodded slowly. "Does it get easier?" "No," I said. "But you get stronger." She seemed to take comfort in that, and I realized that this, passing on knowledge, shaping the next generation, was its own kind of legacy. My father wouldn't understand it in terms of money or traditional success markers, but it mattered. 3 months after the barbecue, I received notice of my promotion board results. I'd been selected for Colonel 06, pending final approval and ceremony scheduling. The promotion wasn't unexpected, my record was strong, my evaluations consistently top tier. But seeing it officially confirmed brought a quiet satisfaction that had nothing to do with external validation. I called my father to tell him. He answered on the second ring. "Hey, honey. Everything okay? I made Colonel. The promotion goes through next quarter." There was a long silence, then his voice, thick with emotion. "Christina, that's incredible. I'm so proud of you." The words should have meant more. Maybe years ago, they would have. But now they were just words, appreciated, acknowledged, but no longer necessary. "Thanks," I said. "The ceremony will be at Joint Base Andrews. I'll send you the details if you want to come." "I'll be there." "Absolutely." We talked for a few more minutes, surface-level conversation that felt less strained than before. Progress, I supposed, even if it wasn't reconciliation. When I hung up, I returned to the mission brief on my screen, the work that defined me more than any rank or title. That evening, I received an encrypted message from Cal. It included a photograph, 6 men in combat gear, desert backdrop, exhaustion, and relief visible in their faces. The caption read, "Helmand Province, 2018. All 6 made it home because of Nighthawk. Thank you." I stared at the photo for a long time, memorizing faces I'd never seen but voices I remembered. Radio chatter, call signs, the controlled urgency of men under fire who trusted a voice they'd never met to bring them home. I saved the photo to a secure folder and closed my laptop. The work continued. It always did. The promotion ceremony was scheduled for a Saturday in March, 1400 hours at Joint Base Andrews. The weather was crisp, early spring sunlight cutting through the residual winter chill. I arrived early, reviewing the ceremony program with the protocol officer, ensuring everything aligned with regulations and timing. Colonel Marcus Lee would officiate. My unit would attend in dress uniform. The whole thing would take 30 minutes, 45 if the speeches ran long. My father confirmed his attendance 3 times in the week leading up to it. Cal asked if he could come too, and I told him yes. Beyond that, I kept the guest list minimal, no fanfare, no unnecessary audience. This wasn't about spectacle. It was about the recognition of work done and work yet to do. When I walked into the ceremony hall, I saw my father standing near the front row, wearing a suit I'd never seen before, dark gray, perfectly pressed. Cal stood beside him in dress blues, ribbons sharp against the fabric. They both straightened when they saw me, and something in their posture reminded me of every change of command ceremony I'd ever attended. The ceremony began with customary precision. The national anthem, the invocation, remarks from Colonel Lee about leadership and service. When my name was called, I walked to the front, my movements automatic from years of similar formations. Colonel Lee read my citation, a summary of my career that felt both accurate and insufficient. Lieutenant Colonel Christina Barron has served with distinction in Air Combat Command intelligence operations, coordinating over 200 combat-linked missions with 0 casualties. Her call sign, Nighthawk, is recognized across joint service operations as synonymous with precision, calm under pressure, and unwavering commitment to mission success. Her leadership has directly contributed to the safety and success of countless service members operating in hostile environments. He continued, listing deployments, commendations, metrics that translated lived experience into official language. When he finished, he held up the colonel rank insignia, silver eagles that felt heavier than their physical weight suggested. It is my honor to promote you to the rank of Colonel 06, United States Air Force. He pinned the insignia to my uniform, the gesture formal but significant. I saluted. He returned it. The room applauded, a brief swell of sound that felt both distant and immediate. When I turned to face the audience, I saw my father standing, his face composed, but his eyes bright. Cal stood beside him, saluting despite being retired and out of uniform protocol. I returned the salute instinctively, then walked back to my seat as the ceremony continued with closing remarks. Afterward, during the reception, my father approached slowly, like he was navigating unfamiliar terrain. "You look good in those eagles," he said. "Thank you. I mean it. This is a big deal, Christina. I know I didn't understand it before, but I'm starting to." Cal joined us, shaking my hand with a grip that conveyed respect more than familiarity. "Congratulations, Colonel. You've earned it." "Appreciate that, Chief." We stood in awkward silence for a moment, the kind that comes when people are rebuilding bridges that were burned down to the foundation. My father cleared his throat. "Can we talk?" "Just for a minute." I glanced at the reception crowd, colleagues, fellow officers, people who knew me through work rather than family. "Sure." Outside. We walked to a courtyard adjacent to the hall, empty except for a few benches and the distant sound of aircraft on approach. My father sat down heavily, and I remained standing, waiting. "I've been thinking a lot about what Cal told me," he started. "About Helmand Province, about the other missions." I asked around, talked to some of my old Army buddies who've worked joint operations. Every single one of them knows the name Nighthawk. They didn't know it was you, but they knew the reputation. "Okay." And I realized I spent 16 years being angry at you for not living the life I thought you should live. I was angry because you didn't get married, didn't give me grandkids, didn't build something I could point to and say, "That's my daughter's success." But you were building something. I just couldn't see it. His voice cracked slightly, and he looked away. "Your mother would have understood. She always said you had your own path." I wish I'd listened to her. I sat down beside him, keeping space between us. Mom supported me because she knew what service meant. She lived it. You lived it too, but somewhere along the way, you forgot. "I know." He rubbed his face, suddenly looking every one of his 62 years. "I'm sorry. For the barbecue, for all the years before that. For making you feel like you had to prove something to me when you were already proving it every day." The apology was more complete than I'd expected. I let it sit between us, weighing it against years of dismissal and disappointment. Forgiveness wasn't automatic, but acknowledgement was a start. "I appreciate that," I said finally. "But you need to understand something. I don't need your approval anymore. I stopped needing it a long time ago. I'm not angry, I'm just past it." "I understand." "Do you?" "Because if you're here trying to rebuild a relationship based on guilt or obligation, I'm not interested. I have a life that works. It's full and meaningful, and it doesn't require validation from people who don't understand it." He nodded slowly. "I'm not asking for a reset. I know I can't undo what I've done. But I'd like to try to know you. The real you, not the version I made up in my head. I looked at him, this man who'd taught me discipline and structure, who'd shown me what service looked like even if he'd forgotten its value in my context. There was sincerity in his face now, raw and uncomfortable. We can try, I said. But it's going to be on my terms. I don't have time for drama or disappointment. If you want to be part of my life, you show up. You listen. You respect the boundaries I set. I can do that. We'll see. I stood, straightening my uniform. The reception was still ongoing, and I had people to thank, colleagues to acknowledge. My father stood too, hesitating before extending his hand. I shook it, firm and professional. "Congratulations, Colonel Barron," he said, his voice formal. "Thank you." I walked back inside, leaving him in the courtyard. It wasn't cruel, it was honest. We'd taken the first step towards something resembling reconciliation, but trust wasn't rebuilt in a single conversation. It required time, consistency, proof that words matched actions. Inside, Cal found me near the refreshment table. "Everything okay?" "Getting there," I said. "Good. For what it's worth, your old man looks like someone hit him with a reality check." "About time." I smiled slightly. "Yeah, about time." The months following my promotion settled into a new rhythm. My responsibilities expanded, more strategic oversight, less direct mission coordination. I attended joint command briefings, liaised with naval and ground forces on operational integration, and mentored a growing number of junior officers navigating intelligence track careers. My father kept his word, mostly. He called weekly, asking careful questions about my work that stayed within the bounds of what I could share. He attended a veterans event in D.C. and mentioned it casually, noting that several people there had worked with Air Force intelligence and spoke highly of the coordination teams. He didn't name-drop or seek validation. He was learning, slowly, to understand my world without needing to center himself in it. One afternoon, he drove to base housing unannounced. I was off duty, reviewing a brief in civilian clothes, when he knocked. I opened the door, surprised. "I should have called," he said, holding an envelope. "But I wanted to give you this in person." I let him inside, the small living room sparse but functional. He looked around, taking in the framed commendations on the wall, the unit photos, the controlled order of a life lived between deployments. "What's in the envelope?" I asked. He handed it to me without ceremony. Inside was a folded flag, the service flag that had draped my mother's casket. I'd assumed he'd kept it, displayed it somewhere in his house as a memorial. "She'd want you to have it," he said quietly. "You're carrying on what she started. Not the same way, but the same spirit." I held the flag carefully, feeling the weight of it, the history embedded in the fabric. My mother had served as an Army nurse for 12 years, deploying twice to combat zones before transitioning to civilian healthcare. She'd understood the cost of service in ways my father had stopped acknowledging after his retirement. "Thank you," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he continued. "About what service means, about what I valued versus what actually matters. Your mom tried to tell me, but I didn't listen. I thought success was about the visible things, money, status, family milestones. But you've built something that matters more than any of that. You've saved lives. You've made a difference in ways I can't even fully understand. And I'm sorry it took me so long to see it." I set the flag down carefully on the table. "I'm not looking for an apology tour, Dad. I just need consistency. Show up when you say you will. Respect what I do even if you don't understand it. That's enough." "I can do that." We sat in silence for a moment, the kind that felt less heavy than before. Progress measured in small increments, a conversation without defensiveness, a gesture of respect, the beginning of something that might resemble mutual understanding. "Do you want coffee?" I asked. He smiled, relieved. "Yeah, that'd be good." We sat at my small kitchen table, drinking coffee in a silence that felt more comfortable than any conversation we'd had in years. He didn't ask probing questions or try to fill the space with unnecessary words. He just sat, present in a way he hadn't been for a long time. When he left, he paused at the door. "I'm proud of you, Christina. I know I should have said it sooner, but I'm saying it now." "I hear you," I said. Not "thank you," not "I forgive you," just acknowledgement that the words had been spoken and received. After he left, I returned to the flag, running my fingers over the stars and stripes. My mother had believed in service as a calling, something that transcended personal ambition or recognition. She'd seen it in me before I'd fully understood it myself. Carrying her flag felt like a completion of something unspoken between us, a legacy passed from one generation to the next. I placed it on a shelf beside my commendations, visible but not ostentatious. It belonged there, a reminder of where I came from and what I carried forward. Cal checked in occasionally, his friendship settling into something easy and unpressured. He'd invite me to veterans events, and I'd decline politely. He'd send articles about military policy or updates on mutual acquaintances, and I'd respond with brief acknowledgments. He understood boundaries in a way my father was still learning. One evening, he called with a specific ask. "We're having a SEAL Team 9 reunion in Virginia Beach next month. I know you don't do public recognition, but we're doing a private ceremony, just the team, honoring people who kept us alive over the years. Your name came up. We'd like you there, if you're willing." I hesitated. Public events weren't my style, but this was different, a closed circle, people who understood the work without needing explanation. "Will there be speeches?" I asked. "Short ones. Mostly just time to meet the people whose voices you knew but never saw." "I'll think about it." "That's all I'm asking." I attended. The reunion was smaller than I expected, maybe 30 people, all veterans, all carrying the quiet intensity of those who'd served in high-risk roles. Cal introduced me simply. "This is Colonel Christina Barron. Call sign Nighthawk. She's the reason some of us are here." No applause, no fanfare. Just nods of recognition, handshakes that conveyed more than words. One man, a former petty officer named Rains, approached me with a photograph. "Helmand Province, 2018. You got us out when we had no right to make it. I've got 3 kids now because of you. Just wanted to say thank you." I looked at the photograph, 6 men, desert camouflage, exhaustion, and relief visible in their posture. I remembered the mission, the calm chatter, the precision required to coordinate extraction under fire. "You did the hard part," I said. "I just made sure you had the support you needed." "Still," he said. "Thank you." The evening continued with similar exchanges, brief, meaningful, rooted in shared experience rather than empty gratitude. These were people who understood that the work wasn't about heroism, it was about competence, consistency, and the quiet satisfaction of doing the job well. When I left, Cal walked me to my car. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah, that was good. Your dad asked if he could come." I told him it wasn't the right venue. "Hope that's okay." I smiled. "That's fine. He's trying, but he doesn't need to be part of everything." Figured as much. But he's coming around. Slowly. Yeah, slowly. I drove back to base, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time, not validation exactly, but recognition from people who understood the work without needing it explained. My father's journey toward understanding was his own, separate from the respect I'd earned in the communities that mattered to me. The two could coexist, but one didn't require the other. A year after the barbecue, I received orders for my colonel promotion ceremony at Joint Base Andrews. The event was larger this time, full honors, joint service attendance, recognition not just of the promotion, but of a career that had quietly shaped operational outcomes across multiple theaters. My father confirmed his attendance without hesitation. Cal would be there too, along with several members of the SEAL team who'd made the trip specifically to see Nighthawk recognized officially. The ceremony was set for 1100 hours on a clear April morning. I arrived early, walking through the venue with the protocol officer, reviewing seating arrangements and program timing. My unit had prepared remarks, and Colonel Lee would officiate the pinning of rank. The whole event would take an hour, maybe longer if the speeches ran over. When I entered the hall, I saw my father already seated, front row, wearing his old army dress uniform. He'd lost weight since I'd last seen him, his frame leaner, his posture somehow both stiffer and more uncertain. Cal sat beside him, also in dress blues, his presence a steadying anchor. The hall filled quickly, fellow officers, enlisted personnel I'd worked with, representatives from Joint Command. The ceremony began with the usual formalities: national anthem, opening remarks, a citation summary that listed deployments, and commendations in language that felt simultaneously accurate and incomplete. Colonel Christina Barron has distinguished herself through 16 years of service in Air Combat Command intelligence operations, the announcer read. Her coordination of over 200 combat-linked missions with zero casualties stands as a testament to her skill, dedication, and unwavering commitment to the safety of American service members. Her call sign, Nighthawk, is recognized across Joint Special Operations as synonymous with precision, calm under pressure, and mission success. The citation continued, detailing specific operations in vague terms that honored classification requirements. When it concluded, Colonel Lee called me forward. I walked to the stage, my movements automatic from years of similar ceremonies. He held up the colonel insignia, silver eagles that caught the light. Colonel Barron, it is my distinct honor and privilege to promote you to the rank of Colonel, 06, United States Air Force. Your service exemplifies the highest standards of our profession. Congratulations. He pinned the insignia to my uniform, the gesture formal, but weighted with significance. I saluted. He returned it. The room erupted in applause. When I turned to face the audience, I saw my father standing, tears streaming down his face, saluting despite being out of active service. Beside him, Cal stood at attention, his salute sharp and unwavering. The entire front row, SEALs, Rangers, Air Force personnel, stood in unified recognition. The applause continued longer than protocol required, and I stood there, accepting it with the same composure I brought to mission coordination. When the ceremony concluded, the reception began. My father approached slowly, his face still wet, his composure shattered in a way I'd never seen. "Christina," he said, his voice breaking. "I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything." He shook his head. "Yes, I do. I need you to know that I finally understand. Not just what you do, but why it matters. Why you matter." "I know, Dad." "No, you don't. You can't. Because I spent 16 years being blind to it, and I don't know how to make that right." I looked at him, this man who'd taught me discipline and service, who'd lost sight of those values in his own disappointment and grief, who was standing here now trying to rebuild something he'd nearly destroyed. "You don't make it right," I said quietly. "You just do better going forward." He nodded, wiping his face. "I can do that. I will do that." Cal approached, extending his hand. "Congratulations, Colonel. You've earned every bit of this." "Thanks, Chief. Your old man's been talking about you nonstop for the past year. Drove me half crazy with it, but it's good to see him finally get it." I glanced at my father, who looked both embarrassed and proud. "He's learning." "We all are," Cal said. "That's the point." The reception continued with the usual rhythms, colleagues offering congratulations, brief conversations about future assignments, the background hum of professional recognition. But through it all, I was aware of my father standing nearby, watching with an expression I'd never seen before, not pride exactly, but something closer to awe. Later, as the crowd thinned, he approached me one more time. "Can I take you to dinner? Just the two of us." I considered it. A year ago, I would have declined automatically, protecting myself from further disappointment. But he'd shown consistency over the past months, kept his word, respected boundaries. Progress measured in small, steady increments. "Sure," I said. "But I picked the place." "Deal." We ended up at a quiet restaurant near base, nothing fancy, just good food and low lighting. We ordered, and for a while, we ate in comfortable silence. Then he set down his fork and looked at me directly. "You didn't waste your life," he said. "I need you to know I understand that now. You gave it meaning. You gave it purpose. And I'm sorry I ever made you doubt that." The words landed differently this time, not because they were new, but because they came from a place of genuine understanding rather than obligation. "I never doubted it," I said. "That's the thing you don't understand. Your opinion didn't change what I knew to be true about my work. It hurt, yes, but it didn't make me question my choices." "Then I'm glad. Because your choices were right." We finished dinner, splitting the check despite his protest. When we walked to our cars, he paused. "Thank you for giving me another chance." I know I didn't deserve it. Maybe not, I said. But Mom would have wanted us to try. He smiled, sad but genuine. Yeah, she would have. I drove back to base, the night clear and quiet. The promotion, the ceremony, the recognition, all of it mattered in its own way. But what mattered more was the clarity I'd found in my own sense of purpose, independent of external validation. My father's journey toward understanding was his own, and I was glad he'd made it. But I didn't need it to know my worth. The transition to colonel brought new responsibilities, strategic planning, cross-service coordination, oversight of multiple intelligence units across the Pacific Theater. My days filled with briefings, policy review, and mentorship of field-grade officers navigating their own career trajectories. I thrived in the role, finding satisfaction in the broader scope and the ability to shape operational frameworks that would outlast my individual contributions. My father became a more consistent presence, though our relationship remained carefully bounded. He attended family events when invited, called weekly with updates that didn't require my emotional labor, and slowly rebuilt trust through action rather than words. He started volunteering at a local veterans center, working with younger vets transitioning to civilian life. When I asked him about it, he said simply, "Figured I should do something useful with my time." Your mom would have liked it. Cal remained a steady friend, checking in occasionally, inviting me to veterans events I mostly declined. But when he asked if I'd speak at a joint service leadership symposium about mission coordination, I agreed. The topic was operational, focused on best practices and lessons learned, and it aligned with my interest in improving cross-branch communication. The symposium took place at Quantico, attended by mid-level officers from all branches. My presentation was technical, grounded in case studies that illustrated coordination challenges and solutions. I kept it factual, avoiding personal narrative or emotional appeal. During the Q&A, a young Army major asked, "How do you maintain composure when coordinating high-stakes missions? How do you handle the pressure?" I considered the question. You train until the procedures become automatic. You trust your team. And you accept that perfection isn't achievable, but excellence is. The pressure doesn't disappear, but you learn to function within it. Another officer asked about work-life balance, and I answered honestly. There isn't balance in the traditional sense. Service requires sacrifice. But if you find meaning in the work, if it aligns with your values, then the sacrifice feels less like loss and more like investment. The symposium concluded with positive feedback, several officers approaching afterward to discuss coordination challenges in their own units. I exchanged contact information, offered to serve as a resource, and returned to my routine with the quiet satisfaction of having contributed something useful. That evening, my father called. "How'd the talk go?" "Fine. Good turnout, solid questions." "I'm glad. Cal mentioned you were speaking. Said you're becoming quite the thought leader." I smiled at the phrase. I wouldn't go that far. Well, he would. And for what it's worth, so would I. Thanks, Dad. We talked for a few more minutes, then said goodbye. The conversation was easy, unremarkable, exactly what a healthy parent-child relationship should be: supportive without being intrusive, interested without demanding. Progress measured in normalcy. Months passed. My unit received commendation for operational excellence during a joint exercise in Guam. I mentored Captain Riley Moss through her transition to major, watching her develop the same steady competence I'd valued in my own career. I coordinated a complex extraction mission in the South China Sea that went flawlessly, earning quiet recognition from Joint Command. Life continued with its rhythms, meaningful and full. One afternoon, my father called with a specific request. There's a Veterans Memorial dedication next month in Richmond. They're honoring service members from Virginia who've served since 9/11. Your name came up. They'd like you there. I hesitated. Public recognition still wasn't my preference. It's not mandatory, he continued. But I think your mom would have wanted you to go. And I'd like to be there with you if that's okay. The mention of my mother shifted my calculation. She'd believed in honoring service publicly, in showing younger generations what commitment looked like. Okay, I said. I'll go. The dedication was smaller than I expected, maybe 200 people, mostly veterans and their families. A local congressman spoke, followed by a retired general who'd served in Iraq. When they called my name, listing my rank and call sign, the audience applauded respectfully. I stood, acknowledged the recognition, and sat back down. No speech required, just presence. Afterward, my father found me near the memorial wall, where names were etched in granite. He stood beside me, reading the inscriptions in silence. "Your mom's name should be here," he said quietly. "She served just as much as any of us." "She's honored in other ways," I said. "Through the people she saved, the nurses she trained." "Legacy doesn't require granite." He nodded, accepting the truth of it. We stood there for a while longer, two people who'd found their way back to mutual respect through persistence and honesty. When we left, he asked, "Can I buy you dinner?" "Sure." But I picked the place. Wouldn't have it any other way. We ate at a diner near the memorial, nothing fancy, just good food and easy conversation. He told me about his work at the Veterans Center, about a young Marine he was helping navigate VA benefits. I told him about Captain Moss's promotion, about the ongoing challenges of coordinating operations across time zones and service branches. We talked like colleagues, like people who respected each other's work and understood its value. When we finished, he walked me to my car. The evening air was cool, early autumn settling over Virginia with crisp clarity. "I'm proud of you," he said. "I know I've said it before, but I'll keep saying it until you believe I mean it." "I believe you, Dad." "Good. Because I do. And I'm grateful you gave me the chance to prove it." I hugged him briefly, a gesture that still felt slightly awkward but genuine. "See you soon." "Yeah, soon." I drove back to base, the road familiar and easy. My life had become what I'd always hoped it would be: meaningful work, steady relationships, respect earned through confidence and consistency. My father's approval was a bonus, appreciated but no longer necessary. The validation I'd sought for so many years had come from within, built through missions completed and lives saved, through the quiet authority of a voice men trusted when everything else fell apart. That was enough. It had always been enough. And now, finally, everyone else understood it too. 2 years after the barbecue, I received notification of a ceremony at the Pentagon, a joint service commendation recognizing personnel who'd contributed to mission success across multiple theaters without direct combat deployment. My name was on the list, along with several other intelligence and coordination officers whose work had enabled high-risk operations. The ceremony was scheduled for 1400 hours on a Friday in November. My father confirmed his attendance immediately. Cal would be there too, along with Major Dana Rhodes, my longtime colleague and friend who'd been nominated for the same commendation. The recognition felt surreal, not because I doubted my contributions, but because the work had always been its own reward. Public acknowledgement was secondary to the operational success itself. But I understood the value of visibility, of showing younger officers that intelligence work mattered, that coordination saved lives just as surely as direct combat action. The day of the ceremony, I arrived at the Pentagon in dress blues, my ribbons sharp against the fabric. My father met me outside, wearing his old Army uniform, the fabric slightly tight but still crisp. He looked older now, his hair more gray than brown, but his posture remained straight, his bearing still recognizably military. "You look good," he said, his voice warm. "Thanks. So do you." We walked inside together, joining the crowd of officers and guests gathering in the ceremonial hall. Cal found us quickly, shaking hands with my father before turning to me. "Big day, Colonel." "It's just a ceremony," I said. "It's never just a ceremony. It's recognition of work that matters. Accept it." The ceremony began with the usual formalities. A senior general spoke about the importance of joint operations, about the unseen work that enabled visible success. When they called my name, I walked to the front, feeling the weight of every mission, every coordination effort, every voice I'd guided through hostile territory. The general read my citation. Colonel Christina Barron, callsign Nighthawk, has coordinated over 250 combat-linked missions across multiple theaters with 0 casualties. Her precision, calm under pressure, and unwavering commitment to mission success have directly contributed to the safety of countless service members. Her work exemplifies the highest standards of military excellence and serves as a model for future generations of intelligence officers. He handed me the commendation, a framed certificate and ribbon that would join the others on my wall. I saluted. He returned it. The audience applauded, and I returned to my seat, feeling not pride exactly, but satisfaction, the quiet kind that comes from work completed well. After the ceremony, during the reception, my father approached with an expression I'd learned to recognize, pride mixed with something deeper, maybe regret for the years he'd missed understanding this part of my life. That was something, he said. It was nice. Nice? Christina, they just recognized you in front of the entire Joint Command. That's more than nice. I smiled. Okay, it was meaningful. He laughed, the sound genuine. Yeah, it was. Cal joined us, holding a glass of champagne. Tonight, Hawk. The voice that brings people home. We toasted, a small circle of mutual respect. Major Rhodes appeared, her own commendation in hand, and we congratulated each other with the easy camaraderie of people who'd worked together through countless missions. The reception continued, conversations flowing around me. But I found myself thinking not about the ceremony or the recognition, but about the work itself, the late nights in operations centers, the static-filled radio calls, the precision required to turn chaos into order. That was the real reward, the thing that gave meaning to the uniform and the rank. Later, as the crowd thinned, my father pulled me aside. Can we talk for a minute? We stepped into a quiet hallway, away from the noise. He looked at me with an intensity one hadn't seen before. I need to tell you something, he said. I've been carrying this for a long time, and I think you deserve to hear it. I waited, letting him find the words. When your mom was dying, she made me promise to support your career. She said you'd found your calling, and that I needed to respect it even if I didn't understand it. I promised her I would. And then I broke that promise. I let my own disappointment and grief turn me into someone who couldn't see what was right in front of me. His voice cracked, but he continued. She'd be so proud of you. And she'd be ashamed of me for how I treated you. I'm sorry, Christina. Not just for the barbecue or the years of dismissiveness, but for betraying the promise I made to the woman I loved. You deserved better. The words hung between us, raw and honest. I'd forgiven him incrementally over the past 2 years, through small actions and consistent effort. But this acknowledgement felt different, a full reckoning with what he'd done and what it had cost. Mom would forgive you, I said quietly. She always believed in second chances. What about you? I thought about it, about the years of distance, the slow rebuilding, the relationship we'd constructed from the ruins of what came before. I already have. Not perfectly, but enough. He hugged me then, tight and desperate, and I let him. We stood there in the Pentagon hallway, two people who'd found their way back to each other through honesty and time. When we pulled apart, he wiped his eyes and smiled. She'd be proud of both of us. For figuring it out. Yeah, I said. She would. We rejoined the reception, the conversation shifting to lighter topics. But something had shifted between us, not forgiveness exactly, because that had been happening gradually all along, but completion. The work of rebuilding was done. What remained was simply living the relationship we'd constructed. That evening, I returned to my quarters and sat in the silence, the commendation certificate on my desk beside the folded service flag my father had given me. Two symbols of legacy, my mother's service and my own, connected through commitment and sacrifice. I thought about the young officers I'd mentored, about Captain Moss and Staff Sergeant Morales and all the others who'd carry forward the work when I eventually retired. Legacy wasn't about recognition or rank. It was about the knowledge passed down, the standards maintained, the quiet competence that kept people alive. My phone buzzed, a text from my father. Proud of you. Always. I sent back a simple reply. Thanks, Dad. And for the first time in years, I believed he truly understood what those words meant. 3 years after that barbecue, my life had settled into a rhythm that felt both demanding and sustainable. I'd been serving as a colonel for over a year, my responsibilities expanding to include strategic planning for Pacific Theater operations and oversight of multiple intelligence coordination units. The work was challenging but fulfilling, each mission a puzzle that required precision, creativity, and unwavering focus. My father had become a regular presence, not intrusive, but steady. He called weekly, attended family events when invited, and continued his work at the Veterans Center. Our relationship had evolved into something neither of us had expected, mutual respect built on honesty rather than obligation. He no longer needed to prove his pride, and I no longer needed to seek his approval. We simply existed in each other's lives with the easy comfort of people who'd done the hard work of reconciliation. Cal remained a close friend, our bond forged through shared understanding of what service meant. He'd introduce me to other veterans whose lives I'd impacted through coordination missions, each conversation reinforcing the reality that the work mattered beyond metrics and commendations. One afternoon in late spring, I received a call from Colonel Lee. "Nighthawk, I need you in my office at 1600 hours. Something you should see." I arrived promptly, finding him behind his desk with a folder marked with classification stamps. He gestured for me to sit. "I've been reviewing your record for potential promotion to Brigadier General," he said without preamble. "Your operational results speak for themselves, but I wanted to discuss the next phase of your career before making formal recommendations." I kept my expression neutral, though the mention of 7 promotion carried weight I couldn't ignore. "What's the timeline?" 18 to 24 months, assuming board approval. "But there's something else." He opened the folder, revealing a series of commendations and impact statements from Joint Service Operations. "I've been collecting these for the past 2 years. Testimonials from personnel across all branches whose lives were directly impacted by your coordination. It's not standard protocol, but I thought you should see them." He handed me the folder. I read through the statements, handwritten letters from SEALs, Rangers, pilots, ground units. Each one detailed a specific mission where my voice had guided them through hostile territory, coordinated extraction under fire, or provided the intelligence that kept them alive. The gratitude was overwhelming, not because I doubted the impact of my work, but because seeing it documented in such personal terms made it real in a way operational reports never could. "Why show me this?" I asked. "Because sometimes we need to see the impact we've made. You've spent 16 years being the voice in the dark, never seeing the faces of the people you've saved. I thought it was time you did." I closed the folder, feeling something shift inside me, not pride exactly, but acknowledgement. The work had mattered. It continued to matter. And regardless of whether I made general or retired as a colonel, that truth remained unchanged. "Thank you, sir. You've earned it, Nighthawk. All of it." That evening, I called my father and told him about the conversation, about the potential promotion and the folder of testimonials. He listened quietly, then said, "Your mother always knew you'd do something extraordinary. I'm glad I lived long enough to see it too." "It's not extraordinary, Dad. It's just the work." "Maybe, but not everyone does the work this well. That's what makes it matter." We talked for a while longer, the conversation easy and unforced. When we hung up, I sat with the folder, rereading the testimonials. Each one represented a life continued, a family kept whole, a future made possible because of coordination and precision. The weight of it felt both humbling and energizing. The following week, I attended a change of command ceremony for Captain Moss, who was taking over as operations coordinator for a forward deployed unit. I sat in the audience, watching her accept the responsibility with the same steady confidence I'd tried to model. After the ceremony, she found me at the reception. "Thank you," she said, "for everything. I wouldn't be here without your mentorship. You earned it yourself." I just pointed the way. Still, it mattered. I smiled. "Then pass it on. Mentor the next generation the way you were mentored. That's how the work continues." She nodded, understanding. Legacy wasn't about individual achievement, it was about the knowledge and standards passed down through generations of officers who understood that competence saved lives. My phone buzzed with a text from Cal, "Reunion next month. Team wants to meet Nighthawk officially. You in?" I typed back, "Maybe. Send details. He replied immediately. Progress. That evening, I sat in my quarters, reviewing mission briefs for the following week. The work continued, relentless and necessary. But for the first time in years, I felt complete, not because external validation had finally arrived, but because I'd built a life aligned with my values, surrounded by people who understood and respected the work. My father had traveled a long journey from dismissal to pride. Cal had given me a community of veterans who knew the weight of the call sign. My mentor carried forward the standards I'd tried to embody. And I continued doing the work that mattered, one mission at a time. The barbecue felt like a lifetime ago, a moment of rupture that had forced honesty and reckoning. What followed was rebuilding, slow and deliberate, until the relationship between my father and me resembled something healthy and sustainable. Not perfect, but real. That night, I received an email from my father. The subject line read simply, "Found this." Inside was a scanned photograph, my mother in her army uniform, smiling at the camera, her expression confident and warm. The note below read, "She always believed in you." "So do I, love, Dad." I saved the photo, added it to the small collection of family images I kept on my desk. Then I turned back to my mission briefs, the work that defined me, the legacy I was building one coordination effort at a time. The voice that brought people home. Nighthawk. That was enough. It had always been enough. And now, finally, everyone understood. I'm Christina Barron, and that's how one backyard comment turned into a reckoning. If you've ever been written off and then proven right, drop your story below. Who finally recognized your worth? What boundary did you set that changed the relationship? If you could go back, what one line would you say to the person who underestimated you? And what would you tell someone facing that moment today? If this resonated, tap like, subscribe, and share it with the one friend who needs a push to stand their ground. New stories every week. Join me.